I'm Melisa Idris and you're watching The Future is Female, the show where we find the extraordinary in every woman. Now joining me on the show, I've got two filmmakers today, local filmmakers, Azreen Madzlan and Minxi Chua. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today, guys.
Thank you.
All right, so both your films have had screenings with the Freedom Film Fest 2019. Now, Minxi, you directed Bila Kami Bersatu, which loosely translated is When We Are One. And Azreen, you directed Demi, Paymitra, or for Paymitra. Also, you're one of Freedom Film Fest's grant winners, yes? All right, okay. So before we kind of get into the film synopsis, and I really want to learn more about the film, I'd like to get to know the both of you a bit better. You're the first filmmakers I've had on the show, so I'm delighted to talk to you. So talk to me about your backgrounds, because Azreen, I'm going to start with you, because you started as a journalist, as a video producer for everything from Malaysia Kini TV to Bloomberg. How did you go from that to becoming a filmmaker?
I think I've done videos for years for Malaysia Kini, and this is my first foray into documentary filmmaking. And I find that news reporting is usually very short. It's only like 2-3 minutes, and documentary filmmaking offers more in-depth coverage of certain issues. So this is why I try to go into documentary filmmaking.
Okay, so you decided that you wanted more time to tell a story, and then documentaries were a perfect platform for that. Okay, and what about you, Minxi? How did you get to, because you were born in Hong Kong, raised raised in KL, Beijing, and you spent a lot of your time in New York, right? You just came back to Malaysia.
So
how
I
did
just
you
moved back
end
last
up
year.
making a film documentary about social inequality here in Malaysia?
So the way that this film kind of started for me was actually at the news organization I work at, New Narrative, where I'm currently working as the research and operations coordinator. But all of us in the team are encouraged to work on stories, to write, and this story it started as a something that one of our editors brought up as a kind of interesting issue, and I picked up on it because I thought, it'd make a good article, it's interesting, labor rights, etc. But when I got to meet the actual people who are the main characters of the story, the women who are hospital cleaners and part of this national union, I kind of realized that, there was, like Azreen saying, there's just so much that kind of needed to be told with the story, and the documentary seemed like a better format for that.
Okay.
Well,
I love that the both of you have kind of journalistic news background, and you've decided to use, I guess, a medium that's longer to tell stories that you felt really needed to go in depth, and that's great. I mean, that's kind of the basis of what good journalism is. So I want to talk about, I always assume that you guys, filmmakers are of the creative side, and you use that as a way to express your creativity, but this was really about telling a story that you felt needed to be told in the Malaysian society, right? Let's talk about these stories. Azreen, I want to talk about For Paymitra, so tell me about what this documentary is all about.
Okay, the story is about the financial struggles of a family living in Pusat Perumahan Rakyat di Serejang, public housing project in KL.
Okay. These are the low-cost
flats in KL, and I focuses the story on the life of a mother and daughter, Aisha and Paymitra. So basically the story is about them lah.
Okay.
So I was inspired by the UNICEF report on urban children poverty that came out last year. And I think just like everyone else, I was shocked when I first heard about the report, and so I wanted to
look
look deeper into the stories and to find out who these children are, what causes them to be hungry and malnourished in a rich state like KL and Putrajaya. So
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I was very moved by that report as well. So UNICEF came out with this report to talk about urban child poverty and how malnourishment, poverty and malnourishment is actually a form of deprivation. It stops the children from social mobility, from growing, from going to school and absorbing. So stunting, right? That was the main issue. So you wanted to put, I guess, a human face to the numbers from this report. How did you find Paymitra? I mean, you had a report and you went, okay, I've got to find someone who embodies this.
I specifically was looking for an Indian family because based on the report that Indian families are the most marginalized communities. So I went there and asked around if they knew any Indian family who are living in poverty. I found one actually, but they were reluctant to be on the camera. And then I found Aisha and family, and I was honest from the start that I wanted to document their story for a film about urban poverty, and luckily they are open and open to tell the stories.
Okay, yeah, that's. I'm curious to know how you got your, I guess, you know, the characters, the subject matters of your documentaries to agree. But before that, Minxi, your documentary Bila Kami Bersatu is looking at four women, and all of them are members of the National Hospital Service Workers Labour Union, right? Yes. So why was their story important to tell?
I think that the story it was important for me because I think that the issue of wages and the issue of labor rights is something that applies to all of us. And similar to Azreen, I feel like it's an issue that, you know, sometimes lacks a human face. And I think that this idea of unions, especially, I think people in Malaysia maybe have a bit of a
it's true. It's true.
Yeah, certain stereotype or perhaps misconceptions about it. So for me, on an educational perspective, I think it was really important to try and, you know, demystify a lot of these concepts around what a union is, what they do, you know, what kind of proceedings take place in this kind of process of unionizing. But then also, yeah, to really connect with these characters who are underrepresented in the media, in our day-to-day lives, you know, cleaners, there's a certain idea that they just kind of fade into the background. Right. And, you know,
sometimes you don't even notice them, right? They're almost invisible.
Yeah, exactly. And the women that we interviewed spoke about that experience, about, you know, that people sometimes do treat them very badly, you know, in the hospitals where they work, despite them being so important to, you know, the functioning of hospitals, because they keep everything clean,
right?
You know, without them.
I mean, you will notice if they're not there.
Yeah.
So the story, Minxi, was of these women fighting to get their wages increased, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So set the scene for us. What was that? So they had a certain wage and they were fighting for a wage increase. Where was the tension in this story?
So basically, cleaners in these, you know, government hospitals now are being paid a basic wage of 1,100 ringgit. And the interesting thing about this, you know, sector, which a lot of kind of service workers are in right now, is that they're contracted. So despite being, you know, technically government employees because they work for a government hospital, they're actually privately contracted, which means that their contracts renew after 1 to 3 years. And the issue with that is that there's no opportunity for wage increase over time, which means that even if you're working for 20 years, which some of our characters were as a hospital cleaner, or if you're working for 1 day or 2 days, your wage stays the same. So that's a big issue for them. And then on the other level, the issue of the basic wage of 1,100 ringgit, it's just not enough for a lot of these people. And most of the people who are working in this industry are women. A lot of them are single women. A lot of them are single mothers, elderly women in their 50s and 60s who may not have the skills to work in other industries. So for them, you know, this issue of the basic wage is and wage increase over time really is a matter of survival. So,
bit of a theme from the both of your documentaries, right? Social and economic inequality. I guess you know, trying to live the realities of working class women. Both of your all of your protagonists are women. Yes. All right. How did you convince them to say, well, this is a story I want to tell, and it's an important story, so trust me with your story? How did you convince them, Minxi? How did you convince 4 people to say yes to you?
You know, the interesting thing was actually that once we kind of opened this door, I felt like there wasn't any convincing necessary. They were very open to speaking.
They wanted to tell their story?
I think so, yeah. And we did have concerns because, like I said, I feel with unions, you know, an issue of like there is management involved as well
Sure.
on the
so
other
they
side.
could be afraid to say something that could be damaging to negotiations or whatever.
Yes,
Okay.
and we have been, we've tried to be very considerate towards that in the filming process, but really these women, they just really wanted their stories to be told, I felt, and I feel very grateful for the opportunity actually to have just opened that door for them to.
Well, that's great. What about you, Azreen? You had to convince someone to let you into their house with cameras and film their 7-year-old girl. How did you have that conversation with Aisha and Paymitra?
I think because I'm a mother as well, so maybe I can relate easily to Aisha and Paymitra's story, and even during the first stage, I did not talk about filmmaking at all. I didn't take out all the cameras. I was just talking to Paymitra, asked her about school.
You made them comfortable. Okay.
Yeah.
So the cameras were in their homes all the time.
Yeah.
Right? So how did you make sure that they didn't feel like it was intrusive, but you needed them to get the story. You needed them to be candid and to be open and vulnerable with you. How did you manage that? Because you didn't have very long, did you? How long did it take?
April until August, I think about 4 months.
Wow, okay. So you had to build the trust very quickly.
Yep.
How was that process like, shooting in the house?
In the house, from morning to night, I spend like a few hours with them. But normally the camera is just there. I didn't really like ask them to talk to the camera. I was just spending time with the family, talking and listening to their stories and just observing what they do every day, and mostly spending time with Paymitra, because Paymitra has no friends actually at home, and she was really excited whenever me and another co-director come. Yeah, she was lonely, so she was really excited when we come, and I'm really looking forward to spend time with us actually.
What did you want to capture about her life? I mean, you wanted to capture her daily life, what she ate, how she studied, how she lived, how she slept, and how she played, because essentially it's a very confined space, right? So
she's actually pretty much isolated from the outside world because the crime rate is pretty high in that area, and the mother did not allow her to play outside. So she spent most of her time inside with her mother. So yeah.
Okay, we're going to come back and continue this conversation right here on The Future is Female with our 2 local filmmakers. Stay tuned. Thanks for staying with us on The Future is Female. I've got 2 local filmmakers here with me, Azreen and Minxi, talking about their documentaries. I want to ask you guys, because both of your documentaries, your films, have a economic inequality angle, a dimension to it. Now, I want to talk about poverty porn, because sometimes there is this concern that when you are producing work that looks into the lives of working class people, that the audience, often maybe an urban upper middle class crowd, sees this as a kind of voyeuristic approach. How do we avoid going down that path of poverty porn? Do you have thoughts?
So yeah, that was something that I was definitely considering, especially when the theme of this year's Freedom Film Festival is Harga Naik Gaji Maintain, and that's an issue that faces a lot of us. But for people who are from, for example, the service industry and more low income industries, it has a much deeper resonance, I think. And part of the reason why this story really attracted me was because I felt like it was the opposite of poverty porn, in the sense of when I was speaking to the women in this union, I found that they were so motivated, and they were so, there was never really a moment where they were kind of languishing in their their difficult experiences. Like, obviously all of them had been through really hard times, but they had kind of found a way to collectively make their lives better. And to me that was really inspiring, and I think that to me that's the opposite of kind of.
And that was a tone you wanted to capture, right? To make sure that we could see the realities that they live, but also how hard they work to survive despite all these challenges. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that for them, their reality is also a reality of, you know, kind of camaraderie, of, you know, working together, of wanting a better life for themselves, and that is just as much a reality as the difficulties they may face. And I feel a lot of times that kind of spirit that's more positive is overlooked. But in the story, I felt like we were able to really, well, hopefully we were able to capture it.
What about you, Azreen? Because, you know, going into Project Perumahan Rakyat, you know, that's kind of a low-cost area. It is, people are struggling, you know, it's urban poverty, right? So how do you avoid falling into the poverty porn trap?
I think for me it's important not to portray Aisyah as a victim, as weak, because throughout the film we can see that she is actually very strong. Although she's suffering, but she's actually very strong. She's fighting for the rights of a child, and she's looking for a job, and she's actually trying to improve her life, although it's hard. So I was careful not to portray her as like this woman who is suffering and not doing anything, and trying to make her looking into the next progress.
Right. Okay. So really to show her as someone who's, you know, striving for something better, for working towards kind of a better life, really reflecting that. I love that, you know, you're two female local filmmakers telling the story of other women trying to make it in this world. But what about yourselves? I mean, you know, this is your first work, your first documentaries. Did you find it difficult? I mean, is this a male-dominated field? I'm asking as someone from the outside. Did you find that this is a male-dominated field, that you had to overcome certain challenges as a female filmmaker? Azreen, did you find that?
I think it's still a very much male-dominated profession, but I think nowadays women just have to grab the opportunity. It's not about opportunity not given, but opportunity not taken. So
there are opportunities out there.
Yeah, so we just have to grab it and not be afraid of the role, and just do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and your team was quite small. It was just
just two women as well.
There you go. Two sisters going at it. All right. So what about you, Minxi? Do you find that this is, you know, you've had certain challenges to overcome as a female filmmaker?
The interesting thing for me actually is, I mean, this is really my first foray into filmmaking. You know, I've never like touched a camera or anything before this. But what I found was actually that, especially Freedom Film Network, which did provide, you know, both our films a lot of support, it was such a warm and welcoming and actually very female environment. You know, Brenda and Anna, who run Freedom Film Network, are both women, and they really, really provided, you know, my film so much support, not just in terms of, you know, technical support, but emotional support.
Right. That's important too, you know, when you feel like giving up, you need someone to have your back, right?
Completely, definitely. Especially for such intense topics, sometimes you can really feel...
Oh, did you feel like you had, you know, kind of lost yourself in this topic? It's really hard to stay positive, right? Did you feel that? It affected you?
Yeah.
What about you? Affected you?
I think for me, it was more kind of... The filming process itself was really grueling sometimes because we filmed up in Ipoh and Bukit Mertajam as well. So there's like a lot of traveling, a lot of, you know, late nights, early mornings.
Right, so that is grueling, it takes a toll on the body and the mind for sure. Azreen, you mentioned a little bit earlier that there are opportunities out there. I'm wondering about the support for local cinema, for budding filmmakers. Where is it coming from, apart from, you know, the Freedom Film Fest, which is wonderful. I'm happy that they're supporting young upcoming filmmakers like you guys, but is there enough support both from the demand side, you know, from audiences for local cinema?
I mean, I'm not a pro filmmaker. I'm not sure I'm the right person to talk about it. But I think if we're talking about financing, they are financing macro and micro financing from FINAS to filmmakers in Malaysia, and they're also financing from other institutions, NGOs.
Okay, so you have kind of support. There is an ecosystem. You just have to figure out.
Yeah.
Okay. Was it difficult for you to figure out, because you guys are first time? I mean, I'm hoping that you will eventually coach other women filmmakers, you know, help them navigate their way. But were there people like that for you, helping you navigate your way around filmmaking for the first time?
I think Brenda and Anna.
Yes.
Okay.
Done a great job. Yeah, giving us the right exposure, the right training for us to go through this first filmmaking experience. Yeah.
Tools, right?
Yeah.
You need the
Yes.
tools because you know, and you need someone to kind of ask for advice.
Yes.
And the time that they put in terms of, you know, as much as I've grown about the late nights and early mornings, they were there the whole time, you know, side by side with us. They're there watching the film from, you know, the very beginning when we just had the most rough footage ever up until the end, you know, helping us with editing. So I really can't thank them enough for the work that they've
Well,
done.
is this something that you guys want to stay in? Do you feel like you can contribute your voices to telling stories within the local film industry? Is this a career that you want to remain in?
Hopefully, yeah.
Is it a viable career in Malaysia, filmmaking? I mean, let's be honest, right? Not every parent out there is watching saying, "I want my kids to be filmmakers."
Yeah. Just don't give up your day job yet.
Okay, so this is a passion project, one that you hope to be able to have a steady income from. Okay, and what about you, Minxi?
I mean, for me, I would say that I would definitely love to continue making documentaries if the funding and the support on that end is there. But yeah, it's really difficult, and I really hope that as time goes on, there are more and more opportunities that come out for budding filmmakers, because I think that apart from myself, there are just so many stories that are waiting to be told. So many people who want to tell those stories, and all they need is that support and the right opportunity.
What do you think is missing right now? I mean, what are the stories that aren't being told enough in Malaysia? Any thoughts, Azreen?
Yeah, I think we need more inclusivity, more diverse stories. For example, like stories about orang asli, stories about people from Sabah and Sarawak, from people with different sexualities, and what we see on the media, on the mainstream cinema, are just the rose-tinted story version of Malaysia. So we need more diverse,
more real
more
stories,
real
right?
stories,
Reality, reflecting what's really on the ground. It's hard to watch sometimes, I have to say.
Yeah, I think stories that touch topics that may be considered taboo in some sense. Like, for example, something that I would really love to explore more is the issue of mental health in Malaysia. I really think that that's something that, it's not just a Malaysian problem, it really is a global, issue, and there's still a lot of stigma around it. And I think that the great thing about film and art in general is that it creates that empathy, it creates that sense of, understanding with people who might not be the same as you.
Okay.
So I really hope, that we can have more stories that explore that.
Well, okay, so in the last couple of minutes that we have left, I want to know personally from the both of you what you took away from this project, from this learning process, if I may, and what do you want people leaving the cinema after having watched your hard work on screen, what do you want them to take away? So what were your personal lessons and what would you hope people to take away?
I think for me, my personal lesson was it dispelled the stereotype that I had about people living with urban poverty, because initially I thought that people who live with urban poverty are people who are homeless, who are drug addicts, drug users, and these are actually people who has house, has job, but they are actually working harder than most of us. So yeah, firstly it's the stereotypes about urban poverty, about urban people who live with urban poverty.
And you hope that people leave after watching this, you hope that they leave just slightly more educated and to dispel those stereotypes?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And what about you, Minxi?
I think for me, the kind of personal message I had taking away, with doing this film was really you can actually do anything if you put your mind to it. I know that's quite a cheesy statement, but
sometimes we need to remind ourselves.
Yeah, because
we can do it.
Yeah, because I feel, from start to finish, this film was filmmaking was something that was so foreign to me. I had no experience at all, and I ended up kind of, being a part of it from start to finish. And for me, that was actually quite an important lesson for myself, because I feel like a lot of, especially young women, we have this message that, you kind of have to make yourself smaller, you kind of have to know your limits, know your place. And for me, like, it was such a gratifying experience to really go out there and push myself, at every step and realize that, oh, actually, I'm not as stupid, I'm not stupid, I'm not bad.
You can do it, which is reflected in your documentary as well, that they can do it. So what do you want people watching this to know about these women, or to kind of walk away with? What message?
Yeah, it's exactly that same message, which is that, a lot of the limitations that society or that other people put on you are not permanent things. They're not things that are set in stone. These are things that, we as individuals and as a collective, as a community, can actually push past, and we can actually challenge the inequality that's in our lives. We can challenge the bad things that are, happening to us. And I think these women have, I hope in the film you'll see that they've provided an excellent example of how to do that, to really fight for their rights and for a better life.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for being on the show. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have on The Future is Female. I will be back with you same time next week, speaking to other exceptional women right here on The Future is Female. Melisa Idris signing off. Thank you, guys.
Okay,
that was
thank
so
you.
quick.